Annyeong, it's Mikey here, and today we're coming back with another Hall Effect Switch video, and this one is going to be from XVX. Now, to thank XVX for sending me this out, I actually was really curious about this one. So, if you guys remember a long time ago, I actually tried out the Raids HE. That was supposed to be like a EC kind of Hall Effect Switch, and it was a good one. I did like it, but it did have a little bit of issues in terms of fitting, in terms of plating. I felt that it was quite loose in a lot of plates. That was just my experience with it, and a lot of people also experienced it as well. But it was really nice. But the thing was, it was still not fully like a EC Switch. Now, today we're going to actually go into reviewing this specific one from XVX, the Whipser Switch. And I'm also going to actually compare it a little bit with an actual EC switch as well. So I have an EC keyboard that you guys will be able to see. It's the Metapulse, and that way we can kind of see what we're dealing with and really see how close we are. So let's go into taking a look, but please make sure to like and subscribe. So introducing the XVX Whipser EC/HE switch. It's actually supposed to be both an EC and HE switch, which you're able to actually use with an EC board, but I'm not going to be able to use this one with my specific EC board that I have. As this is supposed to be a silent build, I'm going to have to boost the decibels up, so please keep in mind that the sound's not going to be great in terms of the wind sound. So let's start off with the actual decibel test. Now this is going to help us to figure out whether or not and how loud this specific switch is going to be. And really when we're doing the decibel test, it's really going to see the fact that this is a very, very quiet switch. We're looking at going to like 50 decibels. It actually should be going even quieter than that. So you're really looking at a very, very quiet switch overall. Of course, it'll depend on the type of build you use. So for example, if you have a CF plate or not, and the type of case that you have will change how loud it can be. But overall, we're really seeing it that to be a silent switch. Now, as you can see with the spacebars do have a bit of sound to it. So you're going to get some times where it gets like a little bit of a clack sound to it. Just keep in mind these things when you are using it. And so these are the things that you're going to deal with this specific switch. Now, overall, do I think that it's really fun? Yes, I think this switch has been very, very fun to use. If you really compare it with like an EC switch, it is very different. So if you have like an EC board and you're expecting this to be like it's going to be very different. So as you can see here, that is my EC board right there. So it is a Metapulse kit, and you really get a different feel from it. So even though they're both 45 grams, technically speaking, the EC dome actually feels a little bit heavier and has a bit more of a actual tactile bump. Now, if I really compare this with the Raids HE as well, which is going to be the previous switch that was like the EC switch that came out, and people were really comparing it and saying like, oh, is this like EC? This is like so close to EC. It still feels a bit different. So the Raids HE is not as great in terms of that feeling compared to the XVX. I find the XVX is actually a lot more like an actual EC switch compared to the Raids HE, especially with how it feels and how it sounds. The Metapulse obviously I think is the best out of all of them. It's going to be an actual EC switch, but of course it's going to have more sound to it. So these other two switches like the Raids HE and the Whipser are going to be more towards the silent build, and you're really going to hear that a lot more. But the actual EC kits might not be a silent switch. So those are the key differences to note. Now, of course, the tactility of the bump is also going to be very different. So the Raids HE is also very, very light tactile bump. So is the XVX Whipser. The Whipser, I would say, has a little bit more of a bump to it comparatively than the actual Raids HE. And in terms of the travel, so they're supposed to be 3.5mm travel. But when we tested here, we actually got a little bit more. So like we're going from 15.1 or 15.3 is where it should be standing at. But it is a bit hard to measure with the EC switches because it's hard to get the full travel there. But you're getting more than 3.5mm in total. So we got 4mm at the end of it. But it's very, very difficult to actually fully measure it with my tool because I'm not getting the exact flatness of the switch itself on the bottom. Now, what is it that you can do with the switch? Now you see here that it has a spring on the bottom, so this is the biggest difference, and this spring is technically supposed to be what is used so that you can actually use on an EC board. And honestly, this switch is actually very, very well done in terms of the lubing. So I was quite surprised it already is lubed. Now, how do you get the stem outs if you do actually want to maybe lube it more and you want to actually change it up a little bit, like for example even grease the springs? Like the easiest way to get the stem out is just use like a pencil tip and then push it off, and then boom, you can actually get it out there, and you will already see that they have a silicone ring, which is going to make it of course very, very silent. You can probably remove it to actually have a little bit more sound to the switch itself. Now, it's hard to really see the looping, but it is already well done on the sides there, which is actually touching the housing, which I was quite surprised with. I honestly thought there would be zero looping because that's what my experience with the Raids HE was, and I was expecting that I have to possibly lube it, but nope, these switches are already come well lubed and done, so you don't really have to worry about opening it up and doing it yourself. You can just use it as is, and I think they did a great job with this one. Now overall, even with the pricing as well, this is going to be definitely a little bit more affordable compared to say some of the other switches. You're looking at about 70 cents a switch at like the 100-piece mark, actually less, around 65 cents. And that's definitely a little bit more on the affordable side, which is quite nice. I think overall, they really did price it nicely, as well as really do a nice build with the switch. Now, let's do a little bit of a closer look to show you the actual tactility. So as you can see here with the two boards here, one is the Optimum case that I use for my Metapulse kit. And you can really see with the XVX Whipser switch here that with the spacebar, as you press it down, it's really very little tactile bump. It's very, very smooth. It's not like a full bump like say other EC switches out there, even with the weight that it actually has with a dome. It's not too big of a tactile bump, and I was quite surprised with that specific feel. As well as the top out sound, it is quite loud, but it is very similar to an EC sound in terms of the top out, and we will actually look at that with the EC board as well that I have. But if you are looking for a more heavy tactile bump and from like an EC feel, unfortunately these aren't going to really have it. Now the Metapulse kit here with the RS domes, you can really see that it has a little bit more bump to it, but overall the top out sound is actually very similar, both switches wise. So they did a great job replicating that part as well. And overall the feel of these switches, I think, is quite nice, and I would say very, very close, like 99% there. Now in terms of the wobble, so on the top end, you do get some wobbling there. So you see the rattle there. So at the top end, for those people that are very, very sensitive to that specific top end rattling, this does have a little bit of that. Now, you don't really want your switch to have too much of that top out rattle if you have a magnetic switch, just if you're looking for very, very good accuracy when you're pressing the switch down. But at the bottom end, you can really see that it starts to get to the point with no wobble at all. And you'll really see that even with the keycaps on, you're getting like no wobble. But the switches do slightly move in terms of the plate, so keep that in mind as well. Now, really overall, I think they did a great job with this. Like the overall feel and everything, I really liked it. I really felt that it was very close to what an EC switch would feel like, and some people are really going to enjoy using this in terms of their boards, especially if you aren't looking for sound. And honestly speaking, EC isn't about sound. EC is more about the feel, and I would say in terms of the feel, you do get a very close point. The best way I could compare it with was like it's close to a 35 gram RS dome. Now you do need the spring here, so they do add these springs for the spacebar. So if you have a long full spacebar, make sure you add this in there, because if you do not add this, you are going to have a hard time with spacebars because they actually won't bounce back up. So that is something I learned. These switches are actually so light in terms of when you're pressing it down that it might not bounce back with a full space bar. Now in terms of the backlighting test, you can really see here that that was like quite bright. And then when you bring it down to 10%, you really can't see anything at 10%, so there's nothing showing. Then I bring it up to 50%, which then you can actually see a little bit. So these switches aren't going to be the brightest switches compared to, say, some of the other Hall effect switches that we've faced or actually used. These ones at the 75% point is actually about this much, and then you go all the way to 100 and it gets a little bit brighter. They are quite accurate with the color, but keep in mind it's not going to be that bright. So we did everything at the comparisons from the EC switch for the Raids HE and the Whipser, and then you guys saw the review of everything close together. Now one of my thoughts on it is that, I mean, as I mentioned with the whole review portion, that these switches are actually quite similar to EC switches. Now, I had a 35 gram RS dome for the Metacubes and the Metapulse kit, and it actually felt very similar. Like if I was to compare the two feelings with a 35 gram domes, it gets really, really similar with that. But these ones feel a little bit heavier with, I would say, a lightly weaker bump compared to, say, the RS domes that I've tried with the Metapulse. And overall, if you really compare it with like EC switches, it gets really close to it, right? You're looking at very close silent switch type feel. The best one I would say that gets really, really close to what these feel like is going to be the NIS keyboards. So I do have one, and that's a pre-built EC board. It's actually very similar. There, it's like pretty much 99% very identical with each other, especially where it comes with the sound, the feel, and the tactile bump. That gets very close. In terms of like if I compare it with the Metapulse domes that I have, obviously it's not gonna be the exact same. The Metapulse domes are a little bit stronger. You're gonna have a little bit more sound to it. It's not gonna be silent. Now keep in mind, the reason why I didn't really have these in terms of like where it is the tone wise and stuff in my spreadsheet, which I normally do, is because these are very silent switches. Like they're meant to be quiet, and you're gonna be working with something that's very, very quiet with very, very little noise, or very, very little tone even. So please keep in mind that was the reason why. Of course, I'll come back with more Hall effect switches and even more Hall effect boards with this channel, and hopefully this helps you guys really see what you're looking for. So please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you go check out the other videos I got, and I'll have to catch you guys next time.